"Where are we going?" Indy asks, climbing into the airship. It's my turn to fly, so I sit in the pilot's seat. "No idea," I say, as usual. Once the rising began in earnest, we stopped getting our assignments in advance. I start my equipment check. Indy helps me. "An older ship today," she says. "Good." I nod in agreement. Indy and I both prefer the older ships, which can be more temperamental than the new ones, but which also have a different feel to them. When you're piloting the new ship, sometimes you feel like it's flying you instead of the other way around. Everything is in order, so we wait for our instructions. It's raining again, and Indy hums, sounding happy. It makes me smile. It's a good thing they have us flying together. I say, "I never see you in the barracks or in the meal hall anymore." "I've been busy," Indy says. She leans closer to me. "After the plague is gone," she asks, "are you going to request to train as a fighter?" Is that why I don't see Indy as much? Is she planning on changing jobs someday? The fighters are the one who cover our air and ships as we fly, have to train for years, and of course, they learn to fight and kill. "No," I say. "What about you?" Before she can answer, our flight plans start coming through. Indy reaches for them, but I snatch away first. She sticks out her tongue at me like we're kids. I look down at the plans. My heart misses a beat. "What is it?" Indy asks, craning her neck to see. "We're going to Oria," I say, stunned. "That's strange," Indy says. "It is. The Rising doesn't like us to pilot into provinces where we once lived. They think we'll want to try and get cargo to people we know instead of letting the Rising distribute according to the needs. The temptation is too high," the commander tells us. "Well, it could be interesting," Indy says. "They say Oria and Central are the places with most society sympathizers. I wonder who still lives there that I could know. Cassia's family was sent to Kenya. My parents were taken away. Does M's family still live there? What about the Caros? I haven't seen Xander since the time I gave him the note from Cassia, a few days after I talked with Indy about getting inside Cadmus City barricade. The Rising sent us in to deliver some of the cures. I think Indy had something to do with the assignment. But whenever I ask her about it, she shrugs it off. They probably just wanted to see if we could make the landing," she says, "since it's one of the most difficult ones in the city." But she's got a grin in her eyes that meant she's not telling the whole story. It worries me, but if Indy doesn't want to tell something, it's pointless to keep asking. But we made inside the walls and helped Caleb with the cargo and delivered Cassia's message. It was good to see Xander again. He was glad to see me too. I wonder how long that lasted after he saw the part of the letter was ruined. The main part of the flight is, as usual, all sky. Then we drop lower. I aim the ship in the direction of the barricade. Though it was the society who put up the white barriers, the Rising has left them in place for now to keep the line between the sick and the healthy. "Oria looks like everywhere else," Indy says, sounding disappointed. I never thought of it that way, but she's right. That was always Oria's most important characteristic, is it was so perfectly society that it was practically anonymous. Not like Cadmus, which had the mountains that set it apart from Arcadia, which had rocky shores in the East Sea and Central with all the lakes. The middle province, Oria, Genya, Baria, and Kenya, all pretty much the same, except one thing. We do have the hill, I tell Indy. You'll see it when we get closer. I feel hungry for the sight of the forested rise, which it's green trees. I feel like if I can't see Cassia, the hill is the next best thing. We stood there together. We hid in the trees, and of the first time our lips touched. I can almost feel the wind on my skin in my hand, and her hand in mine. I swallow. But when we soar a circle over Oria to prepare for landing, I can't seem to find the hill in the dusky light of the evening. Indy is the one who sees it. "That brown thing?" she asks. Right? She's right. The bare brown piece is the hill. I start to bring the ship down. We got closer and closer to the ground. The trees along the street turn large. ground rushes in, and the buildings become familiar instead of generic. At this last second, I pull the ship back up. I feel Indy looking at me. I've never done this before in months I've been running in supplies. Landing wasn't right, I say it into the speakers. It's happened. It will go down on my record as an error, but I have to see the hill again, closer. We come up in the opposite direction and head for the hill, dropping lower and than I should so I can get a good look. Is something wrong? One of the flighters asks over the speaker. No, I say, I'm bringing it in. I've seen what I need to see. The ground is bare. It's been completely bulldozed, burned, butchered. It's like the hill had never had trees. Parts of the hill have slogged downward, no longer anchored by the roots of the living things. A little piece of green silk from Cassia's dress no longer tied to the tree on top of the hill, running out into the white of the wind and the rain and sun. Our burned scraps of poems have been exhumed and reburied and pushed further under. They killed the hill. I land the ship behind me. I hear Caleb open the hold and start dragging out the cases. I sit and stare straight ahead. I want to be back there, on the hill with Cassia. I want it so much I think it might destroy me. All the months I have passed and we're still apart. Put my head in my hands. Kai, Indy asks, are you alright? She puts her hand on my shoulder for a second. Then she lets go and, without looking at me, goes down to help Caleb. I'm grateful for her, for both the touch and the solitude, and neither lasts long. Kai, Indy asks out, come see this. What? I ask, climbing down into the hold. Indy points at a spot near the floor. Concealed earlier by the cases, someone has scratched into the metal of the ship and carved an image into the walls. Reminds me of the pictures back in the carving. They're drinking the sky, Indy says. She's right. It's not rain on that the picture shows. Not like the one I drew back in the burrow. It's different, broken, pieces of sky falling into the ground and people picking them up and tipping water out of them. It makes me thirsty, Indy says. Look, I say, pointing at the figures coming down from the sky. Who do you think this is? The pilot, of course, she says. Did you draw these? I ask Caleb, who appears at the top of the hold ready for more cargo. Draw what? He asks, the picture carved in the side of the ship. No, he says. It must have been one of the other runners. I never vandalized rising property. I hand up another case. We finish our delivery and head for the ship. As we walk, Indy falls back. I turn around and see her talking to Caleb. He shakes his head. Indy steps closer to him. She lifts her chin, and I know exactly what her eyes must look like. She's challenging him about something. Caleb shakes his head again. His posture looks tense. Tell me, I hear Indy say. Now, we should know. No, he says, you're not even the pilot of the flight. Leave it alone. Kai's flying, she says. He has to come all the way here, back to his home province. Do you know how hard this must be? What if we had to go back to Kenya, or whatever it is that you're from? He should at least know what we're doing. We're bringing in supplies, he says. That's not all we're doing, she says. He steps around her. If the pilot wanted you to know, he said over his shoulder, you would. You know you're nothing more than a runner, even to the pilot, Indy says. He doesn't think of you as his. Caleb takes a step back and sees hatred in his face for Indy. Because she's right. She knows what Caleb hopes for. It's a dream of every parentless orphan worker of the Rising. To make the pilot so proud that he claimed them as his own kin. It's Indy's dream too. Indy finds me later out in the field near the camp. She sits down and takes a deep breath. At first, I think she's going to try and make me feel better by talking about things that don't matter. Indy has never been very good at that. We could try it, she says. We could make the run for Central if you want. It's not an option, I say. The fighters will shoot us down. You'd try it if it weren't for me, Indy says. Yes, I agree. And Caleb. I'm finished with the selfishness that let me leave everyone behind on the plains and take only Vic and Eli into the carbine. Caleb is part of our group. When we fly, he's my responsibility. I can't risk him either. Cassia wouldn't want other people to die so that I could find her. If the pilot's telling the truth, it doesn't matter. The plague's under control. Everything will be alright soon, and I can find Cassia, and we can go be together. I want to believe in the pilot. Sometimes I do. Back at the camp, when we were training, I say, "Did you ever fly with him?" "Yes," Indy says simply. That's how I knew he was the pilot, even before he told us. He's flying. She stops, at loss for words, and then her face brightens. It was like the picture I saw today, carved into the ship, she says. It felt like I was drinking the sky. So that you trust him? I ask. Indy nods. But you still run the risk of going into Central with me. Yes, Indy says. If that's what you wanted, she looks at me as if she's trying to see inside me. I'd like her to smile, that beautiful, wise, innocent, devilish smile of hers. What are you thinking about? She asks. What do you see? I want to see you smile, I tell her. And then she does, sun delighted, and I grin back. The grass rustles in the breeze, and Indy leans a little closer. Her face is radiant, hopeful, and raw. I feel like some new holes have been torn in my heart. What's to keep us from flying together? Indy whispers. You and me? I can barely hear her above the wind rustling in the grass. But I know the way the question sounds from her, she's asking something like it before. Cassia, I say. I'm in love with Cassia. You know that. There's no uncertainty in my voice. I know, she says. There's no apology in hers. When Indy wants something badly enough, her instinct is to jump, like Cassia. Indy's breathes in and then she moves. She moves to me. Her hands slide into my hair, her lips press against mine. Nothing like Cassia. I pull back, breathless. Indy, I say. I had to. She says, I'm not sorry.